Welcome to a special edition of Cross-Border Talks dedicated to the ongoing military invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We'll be speaking again with Malgorzata, but this time we have also a special guest, Veronika Sušová-Salminen, who is a Czech-Finnish expert on Russian affairs. She has books and has done a lot of academic and journalistic work that is focused on understanding the space to the east of the European Union, just as Malgorzata itself is knowledgeable with experiences from Russia and Ukraine. So we are starting fast into the issue. What is going on the grounds right now, Sunday evening, at the field? Malgorzata?
Well, first of all, hello everybody, and this is a very hard moment, I think, for everybody in Central Eastern Europe. For me in particular, as I have acquaintance, friends, relatives in both Russia and Ukraine. I traveled to both of these countries. I have a lot of absolutely wonderful experiences from both of them, and it is absolutely heartbreaking for me now to see that Vladimir Putin in the end decided to escalate what the events in Eastern Europe into a full-scale war. As many of the viewers, I think I also hoped to the very last moment that this would not happen, but it did. And 24th of February was the first day of a full-scale war in Ukraine. And well, what happened next, I think, is also a surprise to many of us. Because if Putin wanted this to be a quick war with Kiev being taken in a few days and other major cities under Russian control also in a quick period of time, then he did not achieve his aims. Now we are on Sunday evening and the situation may happen, the new events may happen very swiftly, but what we see now is that Russian forces did not advance much over what they had taken in the very first hours of the conflict. Kharkiv is still under shelling, and Kharkiv is still in Ukrainian hands. Kiev is also controlled by Ukraine, and so are the key cities in the south, in the Black Sea coast. Well, also what we need to do is the Ukrainian people are already paying the horrible price of war. A lot of you, I think, have seen pictures from Kharkiv and Kyiv metro where people are seeking shelter from bombs. And as for Sunday evening, more than 150,000 refugees crossed the Ukrainian-Polish border, and even more people are now heading also other neighbors of Ukraine like Hungary, Romania, and yes, Hungary and Romania, basically. So what is going on is that an imperialist war has been waged on Ukraine, and that Ukrainian people is paying the price, and yet it is defending their territory with fierceness that I think that a lot of people did not expect from them.
Well, there must be reasons for all that bloodshed to happen right now, and I'm now moving to Veronika. What is the explanation for this radical decision by the Russian government, president, and why it happens now?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I have to add to Malgorzata that this is really a very dark moment for all our region and, of course, for people of Russia and Ukraine. And, of course, I will now speak more analytical, even I realize that there is very important human dimension. But still, we have to analyze things. We have to search for reasons in order to understand what is going on and probably also how to stop it. What is now happening is a huge surprise, because even me as analyst, I didn't expect that Putin would go so far with escalation. I really believe that he would not go to such big risk which he took. So this is really something which I see as discontinuity so far within the strategy Putin was taking into the was choosing towards Ukraine and towards the West. Of course, the crisis itself is continuing about 80 years. and it is nothing new. It was more hot and less hot during the 80 years, but it was never solved. In my opinion, the first thing we have to realize is it is a systemic crisis of security environment in Europe. So this is making it even more complex and more difficult to solve, because we have here basically collision between two concepts of security environment, how it was created by the end of the Cold War. I will simplify it in two concepts. It's atlantist, which means the orientation to NATO and the United States, and then we can call it continental. It means more based on the integration of Russia into the security system, and more focused on Europe itself, without the role of NATO and without the huge role of the United States. So this is the first thing. Ukraine got in between of these conceptions and became to be the playing ground of this conflict. Second factor is, of course, great power competition. I will now not explain why the great power competition is happening now. It is just a few words. It is connected with the great shifts within the international affairs during the last, let's say, 10 years after the global financial crisis. But it is the competition between United States of America and Russia, which is based on the fact that Russia is trying to keep the remains of this great power status, and it perceives Ukraine as the instrument in order to do so. So for Russia, Russian perception of Ukraine is based on this, that we need Ukraine and all the post-Soviet space in order to keep its great power status within this region, in order to aspire or have ambition to be global great power, meaning the pole of multiple polar world. The United States most probably wants to stop Russia to doing so, and it is unfortunately using also Ukraine for this aim, to stop Russia to be great power, to stop the ambitions of Russia within the post-Soviet space. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget also about Ukrainians themselves, because this sounds a bit like they don't have any subjectivity, they don't have any own will. Of course they have. So the third dimension of many other dimensions of the crisis is that Ukraine is searching for own identity. It is trying to redefine itself as more pro-Western, let's call, which is of course fitting in its history and in its identity. How it was basically evolving in the last centuries, and this reorientation is basically connected also with something which we can call as post-Soviet nation state building. So there are at least these three dimensions I would talk about at the moment. Of course, there are many other, but for the moment I would stop here, and we can continue later maybe to develop it more.
Okay. The fact that there is a war puts an end to some other ideas, maybe for Ukraine, at least for the time being. Namely, Ukraine probably could have developed in some kind of cooperation between the West and Russia. Maybe it could have moved in certain understanding between the great powers. So let us make a judgment on the West's reaction to this ongoing conflict. How do you evaluate the gravity of these sanctions, which are now imposed on Russia, technological, financial ones? And what does all that mean for the balance of forces between Russia and the West? Malgorzata?
Well, as for now, the US and its allies moved to block certain Russian banks' access to SWIFT system, not all, just certain banks. Also, Russian state media will be banned in the EU, and the European Union took a symbolic step to impose personal sanctions of both Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov, which we don't really know what would be consequences, how strongly will the two be hit, but indeed the symbolic meaning of the step is huge. Also, as I said, the Russian state media will be banned in the European Union just to stop to stop widening Russian propaganda, as the head of European Commission Ursula von der Leyen put it. And the European airspace was closed today for any Russian aircraft. The European Union is also announcing new sanctions not only against Russia but also against Belarus as the state which took part in the invasion. As we know, some of the Russian forces actually had their starting points in Belarus on 24 February. For some political actors in Europe, those sanctions are not enough. As in Poland, for instance, the Social Democrats are calling for even more. They say that the sanctions should hit Russia not only in technological and financial dimension, but also in cultural exchange. Even sport exchange, so that Russia would be virtually cut off of any exchange from the external world. Here, however, we should not forget that Russia is not left powerless even after all these sanctions. Russia has a Chinese ally, and there was already a signal from that part that China is going to help Russia in view of the sanctions. The moratorium against wheat import to China was demonstratively lifted, which shows that China is willing to secure somehow Russian international trade, even though it will be severely hit with the sanctions put against the Russian banks. But talking about reactions, I would like to focus again on a more human dimension, as there are huge demonstrations against the war today in Berlin, more than 100,000 people marching in the city center. There are demonstrations against war and against invasion in virtually every single important city in Europe. In Polish capital, the demonstrations are going on for third day in a row, and the society's willingness to help refugees is absolutely astonishing, given that not long ago, Poles were divided on the issue of helping those refugees who were reaching the EU from Belarus. Now the answer is unequivocal. Almost everybody is trying to help refugees reach cities from the borders, to find shelter, to get basic help as they come to Poland, and so on. So the reaction of societies is immense. The reaction of the big political centers is a little bit less decisive. Let us not forget, we are living in capitalist system, and Russian oligarchy is also a part of world capitalist system. So apparently, from the first reactions, we could have an impression that at least some of the countries in Europe want the crisis to finish swiftly so that the old good business can be continued. And now, under the pressure of their own societies, and they are also forced to change their position.
Well, I'll ask you both a certain question, taking ideas from your presentations. So on one hand, Malgorzata mentioned there is a huge wave, at least among the people, certain condemnation of what is going on in Ukraine and the invasion. On the other hand, the EU has been having this dispute about its future, strategic future, foreign policy future, and what happens now seems to somehow empower the Euro-Atlanticist tendency in the EU. And I would ask both of you to comment what future awaits this region of Central and Southeastern Europe, which is the eastern flank of NATO as well. What will be the role of this region, at least for the time being, given the informations we see and what we know?
Veronika,
maybe you.
Please.
So I will, well, I think we, of course, shouldn't decide everything based on few days after the invasion happened, because really we see that emotions, and it's absolutely understandable, are really high. And the politicians feel to be under the pressure to decide things. So of course, in the long term, things can change and calm down. But still, I think for our region, for the Central and East Europe, let's say for the so-called eastern flank of the European Union, this will be, of course, the situation will pretty much change. The security environment will change. We can expect a high level of militarization. We already was, of course, observing it since 2014, but now we can expect the higher wave. The question is if, of course, it will not mean also that the region will host more bases of United States of America. That could also happen, like next consequence of this development. And I am pretty skeptical about the future of discussion about the strategic, let's say, strategic autonomy of European Union, because this situation will, of course, change the game. And we can already see now that the NATO get new boost, new legitimacy for time being, and the questions, of course, connected with the role of Europe itself, like European Union itself, in the security environment of Europe will be, I think, put to the eyes at the moment. And we have to say that this discussion was really like beginning only. There was really no real discussion yet. We know that Macron was trying to push this discussion towards the European Union public space, but with the Vladimir Putin decision, what he did, even considering the fact that he did this decision, meaning to recognize Donetsk and Luhansk, few hours after promising to Mr. Macron to meet Biden for the next round of negotiation, I think this pretty much weakened this, let's say, neo-continentalist vision of Macron. So I'm very skeptical about this. I think for time being, we have to expect militarization of the eastern flank, worsened security environment for our countries, and of course, also most probably other impacts connected with the freedom of speech, media environment, and all these things.
Well, I want just to say that after 3 days of war, it sounds that Vladimir Putin achieved the exact opposite of what he might have hoped for. If he thought that a quick war would make Ukraine a neutral zone, not taking part in any pro-Western military bloc, then so far he gained this, as Veronika put it, legitimation boost for NATO in Central Europe. Let me just remind you that there were actually demonstrations in Slovakia against the new military agreement with the US. And now these kind of voices seem to be not removed from public space, but rather absolutely weakened. As in Poland, that was already a NATO enthusiast. Now I think there is no serious public figure that would even mention concepts like strategic autonomy of Europe and independent defense concept of Europe without the United States, or even somebody who would oppose more American soldiers coming to Poland. So it seems that instead of showing that Russia is a powerful actor whose voice must be taken into consideration, Putin gave to NATO an excellent occasion to foster hopes that were already put in the alliance. In Poland, we even hear voices that Ukraine should be accepted into the alliance right now, and to European Union too, by the way, without any preconditions, which is, of course, not going to happen. But you see to what level the debate came. We have not yet started discussing some, the concept for regional in the autonomy, when we were put into a middle of something that may be a new Cold War, which perhaps already is a new Cold War, with Russian, Chinese bloc on one side and the Americans and their allies on the other side. And here, sadly, our for Central and Eastern Europe, as I said, it is a really difficult moment. We are now becoming a potential war zone, or some kind of middle ground where the big powers would play their games. And this is honestly, from a human dimension, terrifying prospect for the societies in this part of the world.
Can you comment both in short? If Russia has acted against its interest, as you seem to suggest, why was this done? And as a side question, how is China entering in all that equation, if we look geopolitically at what is going on?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first question.
The first question is why Russia did a mistake, or why Russia didn't act according to its interest, as it seems to be suggested. She acted counter-wise.
Yes, it is interesting. It is. We of course don't see two heads of Vladimir Putin and the people around him, so this is very difficult to guess why they decided so. What is fascinating about all what happened last week, since Monday, let's say, to Wednesday, is that it was very, very sudden. I know there were information about the troops, about trainings which were happening, by the way, not only in Ukraine and Belarus, but they were happening in the Baltic Sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, nearby of Great Britain, on the sea also, and so on. So this looked all like demonstration of force, which was connected with the diplomacy, and then the change between diplomacy and military solution was very, very quick, in my opinion. That can be maybe the reason why they are also not so successful in the current operation, because it was probably not so well prepared as it looked. Could be, I don't know. I'm not a military specialist, but it could be the wrong perception. We have to ask how much Vladimir Putin in last 2 years was really connected with the reality. And now I don't mean the everyday reality of Russia or everyday reality, but with the everyday reality of the stakeholders of the Putinist system, how much he really understands what is going on within there and how to define the interest. And second thing is, of course, the question how good intelligence information he got about the situation in Ukraine, because as we can see, Ukrainians didn't crumble. I think the idea was to crumble them, to attack them and wait when they will start to capitulate. And this didn't happen. Most probably, it doesn't look even now so easily that they will crumble. So I think it was miscalculation. I think it was a rational decision based on the Russian interest, how I was talking about. They think that they have to have Ukraine in order to keep their independent status as great power. And Ukraine is the key for them for it. Plus, of course, the environment, geography, all these things are important. But they miscalculated most probably the situation there. And as already Malgorzata said, this acting against their interest, this acting against that, as Stoltenberg said it a few days before, that Vladimir Putin wants less NATO, but he will have more NATO, is also the part of the problem, that he didn't realize probably, or he counts with it, that this will happen. And this could mean that, and we can discuss it together with China, then that Russia decided that it is leaving the Western flank in the way that it will try to secure it, but it will totally reorient to China. It will leave basically the system which was built already in the end of 17th century, during the 18th century, when Russia was integrated in the European system and was important player all this time, even during the Cold War, that Russia will now totally change and turn back to us and will connect with China. This is, of course, only hypothesis. We don't know what will really happen. But I think from this point of view, it could be the huge break in this sense of the international relations in Europe. And it could also, by the way, mean, unfortunately for us, not only militarization and problems and basically new Cold War on our backyard on our own territories because we are so near of Russia. But in my opinion, this could also mean, in a way, weakening of Europe's global position. Unfortunately, that's one of the also consequences, which will be like negative consequences, which can happen.
Well, I absolutely agree that if Europe now is limited to a kind of regional US ally, then definitely the position of the whole continent is weakened. And perhaps we can do really nothing against this, as European diplomacy was also unable to stop the war. And it is, I think that leaders like Macron and Scholz can even take it as a personal humiliation that Putin did take the decision to attack just after meeting them and promising further talks. And I think that the fact, what was said about Russian intelligence in Ukraine, I think is one of the key questions we need to stop at. If we go back to Putin's speech justifying the recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk republics, as well to many other comments on him, to his many comments on Ukrainian topics, we might wonder to what extent he actually had an idea of what is in Ukrainians' minds and what are the popular sentiments in Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is... it is a different question what the Ukrainian oligarchs thinks and what are their interests and what do ordinary people think. But one thing is sure, I think. If Putin hoped that Russian-speaking part of Ukrainian society will welcome his soldiers and will be interested in the prospect of living in Russia, of having their homeland connected to Russia, when it was an absolute mistake. As let us remember that even in 2014 on Maidan, the Russian-speaking citizens of Kyiv and other cities were also on pro-European side. As for ordinary citizens of Ukraine, Russia has not been an attractive alternative for quite a while. For Ukrainians Ukrainians were tired with their oligarchy, with their corrupted political system, but they knew too well that they can expect nothing better from Russia, which is also an oligarchic state, perhaps for sure, more militarized and less messy than the Ukrainian oligarchic environment, but still, Russia is not a Soviet Union. Russia is not even pretending to be a social state. And I think that Putin also made this point clear enough in his address when mocking Ukraine as Lenin's creation. So for everybody who saw some continuation of Soviet Union in modern Russia, no, it is not at all. And Russian state ideology is neoconservative, is used also instrumentalizing the Orthodox Church. So we can more precisely, we can talk about some kind of return to Tsarist Russia rather than continuing what Soviet Union once stood for.
So at the end of the talk, what are the social consequences of this war for the Russians and Ukrainians on one side and for the Europeans on the other?
Oh, and I forgot to comment on China, because you also asked on China. So I think we can switch to social consequences in a moment, but I think that China definitely deserves a minute of reflection. Well, how do things look from my perspective is that by this miscalculation that Veronika pointed out, now Putin put himself in a position of junior partner to China, I think. That is the case. Now it is China which is helping Russia to overpass the Western sanctions, not the other way around. China needs Russians' resources for at least for a moment, but it is China which is a demographic power. It is China which is a military superpower already, and Russia, it has apparently lost any possibilities of influencing other countries. As I said, Russian model is not interesting for its neighbors. So Russia has now virtually lost all its soft power it had. And now it will be also dependent on China to be able to keep the international trade in place. So it may turn out that Putin made a catastrophic mistake with this invasion, because Russia and China will never be like equal players with their potentials compared, and all that what is happening now may be just a prologue to a future confrontations between US and China, in which Russia's position seems now to be already decided.
Yeah,
and the social consequences on.
Let Veronika, please, if Veronika wanted to say something on China, then I think you could do it now.
Because I just forgot about it. I just very shortly. I think in the case of China and Russia now, I agree with Malgorzata totally. This is that basically Putin will be more dependent on China. And this is first point. He was dependent already before, but and this is interesting, Russia was always trying to balance. And Russia needs balance, like, balance China and also balance China with West and balance the West with China. And now they will lose this opportunity, actually, because if they will turn back to the West, and West will really do all possible, as it seems, to isolate Russia, doesn't mean catastrophe, of course, because we have to remember that West is not all war these days. Like there will be other who will want to do business with Russia. I can just remind that the day of invasion, or one day after the invasion, Pakistan Prime Minister was in Russia, and last year Russia and Pakistan undersigned already contract for new pipeline. So they are searching, of course, the other way, not only China. But this is really, I think, from this point of view, for Russia, not good news to be a junior partner of China. It was something what they were trying to go around always, and now with, especially I think, with financial sanctions, with the thing, because we know that West is especially strong in financial sphere still and in technologies. But in technologies, of course, China is already getting on track with the West, but Russia not. So Russia will be not only dependent with the what Malgorzata said, but also there will be technological dependence, which is, by the way, in making, because what I at least heard and could read is that really the Chinese technological companies are very present in Russia already now. So this will probably boost. So from this point of view, it's also one of the negative consequences, I think, for Russian policy, foreign policy. And they will have to try to balance China probably with some Asian countries. I don't know if India, because India is very much West-oriented. So in this sense, I think it's also the decision which will have negative consequences for Russian foreign policy, for autonomy, because they need autonomy in order to, be the great power. Also, that is the most important definition of being autonomous, having own decision and being sovereign in decision. So this is in question if really they don't achieve again the opposite they wanted.
Okay, and so now we could look at the societies, at the Ukrainian and Russian society. I think very interesting things are going on in the Russian society, as there were people getting out to the streets to protest the war, which was pretty unexpected, given the fact that also Russian media are now being stopped from disseminating information. They are like, not that they are like advised, but strongly advised to just reprint official communications of the defense ministry. Also a lot of people, a lot of analysts also commented that in view of worsening life conditions in Russia, worsening inequalities, Putin's strategy to hold his power firmly was to feed not nationalism, but I would say a cult of Russian victory, a cult of 1948, and also a huge enthusiasm about Russian militarism. So if some of the people find courage to protest against war, even if they know they risk arrest, if they risk different consequences, then it shows that really a part of Russian society, perhaps younger segments of Russian society, but not only, see that their country is not heading in this direction that the government promised them to go. And I wanted to say also a word about the Ukrainian-Russian relations on this human level, because there was a certain dose of contradiction in Russian comments on Ukraine over the previous 8 years. On one hand, we heard that there is a terrible nationalist junta ruling in Kiev, and that after the Maidan, Ukraine was taken by the most extreme nationalist circles. But on the other hand, we still heard from Russians that Ukrainians are a brotherly nation. That there is a particular common history shared by the two, and that these links are not so easily destroyed. Well, today I would say with a big degree of certitude that the brotherly nations are no more, because nobody in Ukraine is going just to forgive an armed invasion, a full-scale invasion that was yet cloaked under the name of special operation and portrayed as demilitarization and denazification, as Putin did it. This really sounds like the worst cases of war propaganda from the past, when what was an actual war was portrayed as a just defense, or I don't know, an operation that does not influence civilian population. When Ukrainians now see that the war has come to their cities, there were already cases of street fighting in cities like Sumy or Kharkiv or Mariupol, the first two in the northeast and the third one by the Azov Sea. So, well, how can you be a brotherly nation if you decide to invade these younger brothers or older brothers, if you wish? So here at this point, I would also like to say that this process of Ukraine getting more and more detached from Russia was to a large extent provoked by Russia itself. I wanted to say again that had Russia been an interesting social model as welfare state or something like this, I think it would be much harder for the West, for the European Union, to get approval in Ukraine as the geopolitical option. I am now talking about what ordinary people may think. For people who went protesting in 2014, hoped for better life in European Union, not for European Union as some abstract concept, but basically for better life in European Union. Had Russia offered better life, and plus the brotherhood of nations, perhaps the brotherhood would be flourishing as now as well, or at least there would be people still willing to invest in that concept, but not definitely not now. And one more personal impression from my journalist trips to the south of Ukraine. More than 10 years ago, it was pretty obvious to everybody coming to cities like Odessa, Mykolaiv, or Kherson that you will meet Russian-speaking populations there, you will meet Russian monuments there. There is still a monument to Suvorov in Ochakiv, a town in the south, which also hosts a naval base of Ukrainian Navy. You will see the figure of Catherine II, the Empress of Russia in Odessa. And, everybody knew that this will be a kind of other world, that is Ukrainian territory, but with a unique history, with a particular approach to the past. What has happened after 2014 is that these people are still speaking Russian, but they are firmly advocating their Ukrainian identity. And they are basically the first to affirm that speaking Russian language does not mean being a Putin's follower. And let me close this personal impression with what I saw with my own eyes in Kherson, a city which is now basically the object of fighting. So, as I told you, as I said, there were a lot of accusations in Ukraine against Russian-speaking populations to be potentially illoyal to the state. And so these Russian-speaking cities in the south decided to put a lot of national symbolic in the public space, so that the Ukrainian colors are visible everywhere and give a clear message that we are Ukrainians, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, but still Ukrainians. So, of course, Russia-Ukrainian's language policy in last years imposed also Ukrainian language in public spaces, as basically it was banned to use Russian in a range of occasions. But I am sure, but this also had an endorsement from a big part of the population, saying what was going
on. There is one more issue which maybe we need to discuss now, probably in short, Veronika. The protests in Russia. It was announced that tens of cities have protesters against this military invasion, and important people from Russian elites, cultural elites, even curiously the daughter of Dmitry Peskov, a well-known figure close to Putin, seem to be against what is going on in Ukraine. What are we to expect? What does this mean? How to read those protests, and what could they hint at with regards to power in Russia? Do they hint at a certain division in Russian elites or society, which could be long term?
Well, I think also the Russian public was actually not ready for this scenario so much. At least when I was seeing I of course don't watch, for example, Первый канал. I don't watch the totally state news. I am rather seeing all the possible outlets in internet, but still some of them are owned by the people connected with the state, and basically all big media in Russia are oligarchic owned and connected with the state. So I didn't see there some kind of strong propaganda for the invasion. On opposite, I think it was also a surprise for the Russian public what happened. And what I was seeing before, when this 3 months nearly speaking about the invasion that Russia is preparing invasion, what was coming from United States, from Western side, it was even ridiculized in Russia, as you know. So I think one of the effect is that also the Russian public is in shock from what happened, but of course not everybody is showing it directly. But I know that in the public space before, they were absolutely refusing people that there will be any invasion. We couldn't do it because we are brother nation. This was the answer. They are our brothers. We couldn't do that. It was the ordinary people telling this in media, in chats, and so on. So now this, of course, totally changed the situation. So I'm not surprised. There were some protests. Even there, of course, as we know, the regime is so much securitized that they don't want to that people show their opinions on the street. So they were, of course, put in jail for a while and so on. So the reaction, there is definitely negative reaction, and I am not, of course, somebody who foresees the future, but I would guess that if the war will be complicated, if it will continue in a bad scenario, there will be more dead people. If they will try to really do some kind of big attacks on the Ukrainian towns, and there will be more dead people, I think there will be more and more negative reaction in the public, plus of course social and economic consequences. There will be social and economic consequences. And Putin, for all 20 years, he was always seen as a leader who stabilized the society, who is the stabilizer of society, who is at least not probably giving big social welfare, but who is at least paying the salaries, who is indexing the pensions, and who is these basic things always worked. And now this could be the huge question: what will happen with the sanctions? How it will influence the Russian economy, which is not in good shape, by the way. There is high inflation, there are lower real wages, and so on. So this is one aspect which is important. Second aspect is what you ask is elites. As everybody probably knows, but I will point it out, Russia has very pro-Western elites in lifestyle. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily geopolitically, but Russia is still Peter the Great Russia, Russia which westernized, which sees in West models. So probably the elites will probably not see us, plus that now we cannot fly to and visit Paris, and Beijing will be not the replacement for that. Let's put it like this. And of course, the war itself, the consequences of it are for elites very unpleasant because they will probably lose a lot of money, a lot of opportunities, investment, actives in the banks, and so on. So this what we saw in the beginning, these few examples of dissent, public dissent, could be only the top of the iceberg, because I have to say that the Russian system is very untransparent, very Byzantine. You don't know what's going on within elites, what is the real opinions. We only know there are fractions. We know there are different groups which can fight for money. We also know now that with the Green Deal, which probably will not happen, but with the changes with the energy market, with all this, there is already going on fight for new oil. You know, what will be the new oil for the Russian elites, because they live from this. So this everything can make the situation for Putin more complicated. Even as I say, I cannot say it 100%. I cannot tell you who is against, who was not against, but I would say business pretty much is not happy about what is going on. And I would say that in general, the disbalance which will create this situation also in Russia, it means that the Siloviks will be stronger and stronger. This can really disbalance on all the system of Putin, because it was always based on stabilization and balance within the society and within the elites.
Well, the invasion in Ukraine is obviously a great disturbance in the force, if I may say. So cross-border talks will continue to reflect on this issue, and I believe we have the knowledge and the experience to do that. So let us, our listeners and viewers, continue following our channel in YouTube, and stay tuned for further episodes and cross-border talks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.